day. Welcome to another Tip Tuesday video. My name is Stephanie and I will be showcasing how we can establish central repository listings based on default companies utilized within user location settings and how we can actually update some profile manager settings for how a specific profile type will interact with those listings. So as you can see here, I am looking at a unit under master company. And if I look at manufacturer and model, I have a few options for manufacturer. And depending on the manufacturer that I choose, it will dictate what model number I have available. Now, one thing to keep in mind is right now my user location settings do not have a default company option selected. So as you can see here, under default companies, this is where I can strategically align central repository listing. So for instance, on my user, my standards might always arise from master company, and I might want to restrict that for my user where I'm only ever visible to the masters under master company. And the same can be said for any one of these options, user-defined lists or custom fields. So for instance, if we're looking at manufacturer and model, I might, for my user, want to only see the manufacturer and model listing from Add Edit under master company. I want one central repository that I need to manage as a system administrator, and I want my other users to be able to use those same default options. You can find those really handy, especially with note types, where you might have several different right-click options for your event comments for establishing some note types to choose from. And if we don't have a default company established, so for instance, my manufacturer and model is not established on my user. So when I go to master company, I have an option of 3 manufacturers. But if I were to go to example company, I only have access to 1. And if I go to test company, I have access to none. And that is due to the add edit listing. So if I go to manufacturers, you can see that a company is specified. So if I click on example company, I get access to 1 manufacturer. Master company, I get access to 3, and test company has none. With models, it is a little bit different. It is similar to the type and subtype field where you must have a manufacturer listed in order for the model numbers to appear. So if I go to example company, Fluke is the only manufacturer I have, and these are my 2 options. Whereas if I go to master company, I have Fluke, Mitutoyo, and Keysight. Now what you can see here is my Keysight 5522A is an available option within master company, but that is actually a Fluke calibrator, not a Keysight unit. So this is really handy when we're looking at central repository listings where a user inadvertently added in 5522 under Keysight, and that should have been under Fluke. So our second half of this option is restricting settings, right? So let me go back over to equipment view, and I'm actually going to launch over to profile manager. So bear with me. So now that I am in profile manager, another important thing in Profile Manager is we can establish some global settings. Now, if you are utilizing branch systems, I believe Parker released a couple of videos showcasing how you can get that implemented within your system. That is really handy if you are looking at a multi-location site where you utilize branches to establish the different locations. So you would see a different global preference for branch systems. But if I go into the Setup Full Client Global Preferences, I can establish a system-wide setting where all users can use the same repository listings. Or we can individualize it where each individual user has a default listing to choose from. So for right now, I'm not going to establish any sort of system-wide setting. I'm going to press cancel here. But one thing to keep in mind, right? We're looking specifically at manufacturer and model. So if I control F here and I look up manufacturer, I have a few different users within my system. Oops, sorry about that. I have a few different users in my system. I have an auto add, a prompt, and a full deny user within my system. And I will showcase how those interactions differ based on the profile manager settings that I have applied. So let me get back into profile manager and back to that screen. So I'm going to look up manufacturer here, edit. So right now I am in profile manager and I am specifically looking up manufacturer information. So as you can see at the top, I am currently looking at the system administrator profile. Once selected in this listing, I selected Control F to open up my search bar, and I'm looking up manufacturer. So as you can see here, we have blocking access and then validation, and we have a few different options, right? We have validating through the equipment information or the template information. So usually if you're doing one or utilizing templates, you want to make sure that both are in alignment with each other. And then the other important thing is blocking access. Now, if we were looking at company details, we would see company information here. So blocking access to company, validating company information. But because we're looking at manufacturer model, we're looking at equipment information. So as you can see here, as a system administrator, we're not blocking access to modify the manufacturer in the add edit listing. This one, sorry, blocking access to utilities. When it comes to manufacturer, we're going to validate against the list. I do have automatically add checked on, but because prompt user is established, it will prompt me to verify if I want to add in the listing. So one thing to keep in mind when looking at the validation section is when we are validate against selection list, if this is checked, the user can only select what is in that drop down. It's going to look at what is in that selection list for them. If this is checked, the automatically add all new manufacturers to selection list. That will automatically add the new unit value to the listing under add edit. And then prompt user, if this is checked, that means if it is a new manufacturer, the user will receive a prompt message validating or confirming if they wish to add that manufacturer to the listing and add edit. So if I go to auto, we can see here, we want to uncheck this option. So we're not going to block the user from adding or editing manufacturers in the selection list, but we want them to automatically just add the new manufacturer. When we go to prompt, let's just make sure. So for prompt, again, we're not going to block them from utilizing add edit manufacturers, but what we want to ensure is that they receive a prompt when they're adding in a new one. So you can see here, it's going to validate against the selection list. And if it is new, it's going to prompt the user that it's a new item. And then if I go to deny, what you will see here is that user is blocked from accessing manufacturers and they can only validate against the selection list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out of my system administrator profile. I'm going to log in as each one of these so you can see what those settings and how they differ. So I am currently logged in as the auto add user, and I am specifically looking at test company because remember, keep in mind, I do not have any default companies selected. So if I was utilizing one repository listing, I would probably have a default company associated. So I'm only looking at one list no matter what company I'm looking in. But for this purpose, I'm going to utilize test company. Under test company, I have no manufacturer or model numbers to choose from. And with auto add, it is going to auto apply that value to the system. So as you can see here, I can save those changes and I'm not receiving a prompt to add those options in the listing. So if I were to navigate to add edit for manufacturer under test company, Fluke now exists, and under model, 77 now exists. Because my security profile settings for this profile type automatically adds to the listing. So I'm going to log out and I'm going to log in as the prompt user, and we're going to see that interaction change. So now I am logged in as the prompt user. Now I'm still going to have availability to the options that are available under test company. Again, I do not have a default company established for manufacturer, so I'm seeing everything that is listed under test company. But now if I were to include key site, I do apologize. Let me access Profile Manager. I should be receiving a prompt to include, and I have a setting that is invalid. So let me verify which setting that is, and I will showcase that to you in Profile Manager. So I have found this. So in my earlier notations, I had mentioned, or I had the prompt user selected to validate and only prompt, but I actually need the automatically add checked as well. So if I want that user to receive the prompt message before adding in the new model or manufacturer, I need to ensure that all three are selected. So it's kind of a hierarchy system, right? If this is checked, I need this checked. If this is checked, I need both of these checked. So now you can see here, I'm not blocking that user from model numbers, but if they are adding in a new model number or new manufacturer, it's going to verify against the selection list, attempt to add it, but realize a prompt needs to be established and confirmed. So if I go to the deny user, you can see that they only have the option to validate against the selection list, and I'm blocking them from add edit. So let's update this. We're going to cancel that so we have no manufacturer here. So again, I am still logged in as that prompt user. I ran a reload all settings since I just updated their profile security settings. So now if I were to add in key site, I received the prompt that it's not a valid manufacturer and if I wish to update the list. If I say yes, it'll update the add edit listing for manufacturer under test company. If I select no, it's just going to not allow me to save those changes. So now again, for the model number, I receive an update list. So again, if I say no, you can see it just clears out the value and I'm no longer able to save that prompt. So I'm going to select yes and then save those changes to the unit. And now as the prompt user, if I go to manufacturer, I now see key site under test company, and I can see that model number that I applied. So now I'm going to log in as the deny user. Now this user, so we're going to log out here. Now this user is only able to look at what is available in the drop-down listing. They cannot add in any value that does not exist under the drop down. So as you can see here, if I go to add edit for manufacturer, you can see that I am restricted access as the denial user. So I cannot see what is available in add edit, which means I cannot manipulate the add edit listing. Now, you do not need to deny them access to the utility. I just wanted to showcase that it is an available option, and that is the blocking access to utilities, and it'll be selection list, adding and editing from that specific parameter that we're looking at. In this case, we're looking at manufacturer and models. So I'm looking at test 2, and as you can see here, I can only select 34401A. And if I were to try to type in, say I spelt it incorrectly and it's 34401. You can see it is not a valid model number, so I cannot select that as a value. And as you can see here, I cannot interact with this. So one thing that I realized on the deny user is I was actually blocking the user access from modifying the manufacturer at all. That is why we were looking at a gray field for the manufacturer. It was something that I had missed based on the profile type that I had cloned over. So I just updated those settings. That should remove the gray box for manufacturer from being able to choose from. So let me reload all settings. And now you can see here for manufacturer, I can pick from the drop-down option under test company, as well as the model number. So for instance, as this denial user, if I were to try to add in a Fluke 87 and save those changes, I get denied permission from Access to do so, which is really handy when you want to look at a central repository listing. So if I update my user location settings and choose a default company, and again, maybe perhaps we want to establish this as a system-wide setting or a global preference under Profile Manager. But now when I look at manufacturer models, the available drop-down options are all going to arise from the master company add edit listing. So now you can see here under test company, because my default company is established for master company, I'm utilizing one repository listing, no matter what company I'm looking at, for what manufacturer and model options I have available. So you can see here, I have a much more extensive listing that is available. Now, because of the user I am logged in, I'm still denied from adding to this list. If I was the prompt user or the auto add user, I can add to the repository options. But in this case, my deny user is only able to select from what is in the dropdown. So I hope this was helpful. Things to keep in mind is under user location settings, whether doing that as a global preference or specifically user to user, establishing default companies for a central repository listing to work off of is a great method or tool to utilize within IndySoft. You can make sure that procedures are all managed from one company of add edit procedures. Same thing with manufacturer and model. Items like employees might be useful. You want to keep in mind that if you establish a default company for employees, that will alter your interaction with that owner field. You can see on the left-hand side here. So if I have a default employee existing company to company, that drop-down listing will always be employees under that specific company. So if you think of employees as users within the system, it could be internal users for standard or master association for who quote unquote owns that standard. So establishing a default company for employees is really great there. But if you are a corporation that runs calibrations for customers and you establish owners based on employees that exist under their company, establishing an employee default might not be the best option. Same thing with departments, right? We might not have the same departments company to company. So having different repository listings are really handy. So not establishing a default company is probably ideal in that circumstance, but you can certainly do so if need be. Manufacturer model, descriptions, conditions, procedures, documents, custom text fields, those all might benefit from having one central repository listing. And then as you restrict those repository listings, you can actually restrict or apply additional permissions based on the profile type. So a user can automatically add to the repository listing. They'll always receive a prompt if it is a new value to confirm if they want to add to that listing. Or you can have a profile type where they are just denied. They are only able to access or utilize what is in that drop-down listing of options to choose from, and they cannot alter that course. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to support@IndySoft.com. But I hope you have a wonderful evening, and thank you for joining me.